Welcome back to Marketing Actively. Today I am joined by James McCormack, who is the CEO, Managing Director.
That's what they gave me, the title.
The big man at Oil Performance Coffee. Oil, OIL, stands for Optimise Your Life. It's a functional mushroom coffee brand. Is that what you go with?
Yeah.
Yeah, performance coffee brand. Yeah, we'll go with that.
A health and wellness brand.
Okay, there we go.
Whichever,
probably
comes under a big umbrella.
Probably should have asked you that before, but we'll go with that anyway. So James is joining me today, and we're going to have a quick discussion about our background, about how James got into business, how he got into entrepreneurship, how he uses physical activity as an outlet for obviously creativity and kind of mental health control. And we're going to speak a little bit about a collaboration that James through Oil and myself through Coffee and Commerce that we're going to run now for now anyway, and see how it goes.
See where it goes. It's an experiment.
Exactly. We'll see what happens, see what comes out of it. Obviously, over the last 12 months or so through Coffee and Commerce, we've been developing our own coffee. Found it a very difficult market to break into, but James is an expert in the coffee market, and I found that through using Oil myself previously, that it's a really, really good product, and that I think blending that in with what we do at Coffee and Commerce and the active lifestyle and inherently being active through jiu-jitsu and MMA, that it was a really good collaboration that we could work with. So I asked James about it, spoke to him about it, and so that's something that we're gonna run over the next while. And James, do you want to give us a bit of a background to yourself, how you get into business, how you get into coffee, and how you get into mushroom coffee, I suppose?
How long do we have?
Let's see, we've the rest of the day. Let's go.
I'll do like a shortened version, I suppose we could go. Well, my name is James McCormack. As Chris said, I'm currently CEO of Oil, which stands for, it's an acronym that stands for Optimise Your Life. We started that 2 years ago during COVID. Prior to that, I've had 5 other companies. So this is my 6th company. My first ever company, I started back in 2009. And I suppose the story of getting into that goes back to my childhood and your environment and how you're influenced, particularly by my dad. My dad was, and his dad, in fact, as well. So I'll go back to my granddad, maybe. Just I keep that very short because I find it's quite an interesting kind of aside into entrepreneurship. My granddad, his name is James McCormack as well. He was from Westmeath, as I am myself, and in pre-World War II, he moved to London. And during World War II, he became a millionaire, essentially. So this is in the 1940s. And he became a millionaire after London was bombed. And essentially, he was part of the reconstruction of London after the bombings and such. And he was building air raid shelters, and he was redeveloping properties then after that. And he became extremely wealthy. And my dad then grew up in this extreme wealth at the time, from what I can gather. So they built a mansion in Ealing in London, which is in the centre of London, essentially. My dad and his 6 siblings were chauffeur driven to school. And so they grew up with this wealth, essentially. And when my dad was 18, his dad lost it all. And his dad was a chronic alcoholic. Okay. And so I think one of my dad's first jobs for him was to be his chauffeur and driving him around the place, and he always tells a story that he had a revenue meeting, or it's a HMRC meeting, a tax meeting with the tax man, essentially, and he was driving him to this 11 a.m. meeting, and my granddad had cracked open a bottle of champagne in the back seat and started boozing away before the meeting. Subsequently, after that meeting, he found out he'd lost all his money. So he was probably preempting all of this.
His last celebration with some champagne.
And unfortunately, he died young. He died at 51. So it's tying entrepreneurship and health together already from very early on in my life. And I suppose back in that time, he was very wealthy in the UK, and as he was from Westmeath, he used to come back during summers, and he would often come back, and he managed to build 2 hotels in Athlone I guess it was in the 50s or so. So whereas they lost all their money in the UK, they still had a couple of hotels in Ireland. So ultimately, most of the family moved. Once my dad and his family moved back to Ireland for a period after they lost all the money, and that kind of leads into my dad's kind of life. He was a larger than life character. This is the household that I grew up in anyway. He was more of a kind of a Del Boy kind of entrepreneur. He was always dabbling in something, mostly in property, but he kind of followed on from his own dad. In 1984, when I was 4 years old, he lost everything as well within the construction kind of sector. And we moved from Dublin down to Mullingar, and that's how I ended up kind of essentially growing up in Westmeath. And from there, he kind of moved back to London and he started from scratch again. And, for a long time, especially in my childhood, we didn't have any money. We were kind of, if you can consider us poor, maybe, because he had lost everything and he was rebuilding everything from scratch again. And he was always this kind of nomadic kind of character. He was always traveling from place to place. He was never really settled in Ireland with us. And he was so at home, he was never really there all the time. He would come back in and out. And normally when he'd come home, he'd be locked out of his head after having a rake of pints before he'd come home after his trip to London. And then he'd be heading back to London on a Sunday evening. So he might only spend 1 day a week with us. And that was the kind of the childhood that I grew up in. But when I was 18, he moved to Cape Town and he started a construction company in Cape Town. And he'd made a substantial amount of money down there. I think during that kind of period in the kind of late 90s. Early 2000s, when there was a big kind of huge growth down there in Cape Town in South Africa particularly. So I used to go down there quite a lot. So the general point that I'm getting to with this side of the story is my dad, where he wasn't necessarily a company owner or a traditional entrepreneur. He was always kind of buying and selling and doing deals, and that's what he was really good at. And he unfortunately passed away when he was only 57. He was like his dad. He had an issue with alcohol, and he had an issue with his diet, and so he was very, very overweight, and he passed away of a heart attack when he was 57, so way too young. And for me, then I was in my mid-20s at that stage, and I'd always harbored the idea of working for myself, but I never really had the courage, I suppose, or I never had the awareness about how to do it. Particularly in my early 20s, I was more of doing lots of traveling and kind of doing odd jobs here and there. But it wasn't like, as much as I say now, entrepreneurship is in my DNA. I didn't know how to go about it in the very early days. So I had a load of jobs then. From the age of 24, I worked in the banking sector. I worked in property. I did loads of jobs that I was terrible at. I didn't connect with any of them. Doing spreadsheets or showing people around houses, I didn't get anything out of it, And until the reality of what happened was I didn't like those jobs and I got fired from them all. So I got fired from about 4 jobs in a row, which is the truth. And
the start of a real entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, I think looking back, it's just like I just had no interest in these jobs, and I just couldn't connect with them, and I would just zone out. And obviously, I was kind of a shit employee then because of that, and probably rightly I was let go or fired or whatever. And I remember it was kind of the boom, kind of 2006, 2005, 2006, when the property sector was just going crazy and the Celtic Tiger was going mad. And a friend of mine said, would you ever consider working as a mortgage broker? And I was like, sounds good, selling financial services. But I got a job in this place and absolutely loved it. Okay, because it was the first time I'd ever done sales. Okay. And I actually got hired by a guy. I was his first hire, in this mortgage brokerage. And I lasted 7 months until he fired me. But it wasn't because I wasn't working hard. I was working like 7 days a week. But this was the first time I was given autonomy. I was given targets. I had to go out and do my own thing. And I was really driven by that, by achieving and by goals and all that type of stuff. But 7 months later, he kind of let me go. And you kind of felt like it was a bit crestfallen because you kind of feel like a big failure, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's like 3 or 4 jobs I've been fired from. You just feel like you're a bit of a loser, basically.
It's becoming a pattern now, yeah.
Yeah. But what happened then was I got a job in a much bigger mortgage brokerage, and I brought everything that I learned in my little book that I had with me, and I thrived in it. I was the first in to work. I was the last to leave. I would just hammer the phones. I would, my wife actually worked in property development, and her bosses allowed me to be the mortgage broker on site of their new developments.
Okay.
And so I was, I think, in a company of 150 people, maybe 60 salespeople. I was the only one who brought with me a new development, and that kind of like catapulted me in terms of sales, if you get me.
Yeah.
So I was suddenly, out of 60 salespeople, I was in the top 5. And that was a massive motivator, because you're starting to make
a good
commission.
impression from the start.
Making good impression, but you're making money as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was on a basic salary, and in that company you had to qualify your salary through your commission. So even when you closed a load of commission, you had to basically pay for yourself to be there, which is fine. And then once you closed X amount, you get like, so I think the first month I ever got like €2,000 extra in my paycheck. I was like, all right, that feels good.
I'm rich.
That feels, well, definitely, because I'd never made any money in my life.
Yeah.
And that was a motivator, and I did pretty well there for 3 years. And ultimately in December 2008, I was made redundant because the market crashed.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bit better because I wasn't fired on this occasion, but I was just let go, and I got I think I got like a €3,000 redundancy payment or something like that. And basically that went straight into our mortgage, because we just got bought my first house with my now wife, Linda. And it was 2009 was quite weird because I had no job, I had no income, and it's a big...
And a new mortgage.
and a mortgage. Didn't have kids at this time, so but was pre-marriage, so just where you are right now.
Pretty much.
So we were in a new house, and there was a huge decision to make. Do I go back working in the private sector or get a job, or do I go out and try to start my own business, which I'd always harbored. I had a failed kind of, when I was working in the financial services business, I'd wanted to start my own mortgage business, and I'd put like a big chunk of work into starting my own business, but there's a huge amount of red tape to jump through in financial regulation. So that never took off. So I was always there. It was in my DNA from my family, as I was talking about earlier. And where it went from there, it went from me not having any money. Literally, I had zero money. And my wife, Linda, saying, okay, what are we going to do? Yeah. And she never pressured me into getting a job. Back in the private sector. It was like, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to start a business. That's the basic conversation. And she gave me €500, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with €500. And I had a load of ideas at the beginning. One of them was a car wash, which was very close to I was just going to go around and wash cars. I was going to go into whatever. I had a load of little ideas about car washes, but that didn't take off. And then the next one was a sandwich business. Okay. Not because I'm into food or anything. It was just because the barriers of entry are so low in that sector that with €500, I could sublet a kitchen for €100. This is what I did. I sublet a kitchen for €100 a week, I think it was. I built a website for €200. So Shopify was not around at that time. So it was just like a basic kind of website where people could, say, place an order, and it would go into my email. Okay. And I'd print out the email, then I'd process the order that way, and then take the cash.
Completely manual.
All manual. And I'm the opposite of a tech person.
Yeah.
That kind of just made sense.
You just did what you had to do to get it set up and get some sort of money coming in.
Exactly. And the €200 website was so basic, but it was functional. Do you know what I mean? And then with the balance of €100, I bought raw materials. And it was really, looking back, it was very sketchy with the amount of money that I had. Like, I don't know how I actually did it, but what I did was, and there was a huge, there was a period from April when I incorporated the company until November when it actually started, where I was just scared of starting. I created loads of excuses around working on spreadsheets, around negotiating deals with suppliers, which was a bit stupid because I wasn't actually giving them any money. Yeah. I remember like asking them for an extra 5% off here, and if they wanted me as their customer when I hadn't even started. But it was at that time where the crash was there and everyone was eager for new customers, so they were kind of saying, yeah, fine, we'll give you the 5% off.
Yeah.
And I started, and in November the 6th, I think was a Monday, I went in 4:30 in the morning, and I made 30 terrible sandwiches, I would imagine. And it was literally the scariest day of my life, because I had to make sandwiches, put them in my crate, put them into my car, which is at the time was a 5 Series BMW that I had as a mortgage broker. And I would drive into Sandyford Industrial Estate, and I would hide my car because I was embarrassed because I wasn't driving a professional, like proper catering van or something. Yeah. And I suppose, there's HSE rules around, how you deliver food as well. But I did have a little icebox kind of cooler container where I kept all this stuff. And if HSE is listening, I did it right. But I would just rock up to businesses that I had called the day before, and they would send a message around the company, and they'd walk out to the front door where I was just standing, and they'd buy stuff off me. And the first day I went trading, I was just so scared, but I finished the day and I went down to Linda's office, which was down in Ballsbridge, and we counted the money, and I'll never forget it. We counted that I'd made 17 euros. It generated 17 euros. It wasn't profit, it was just revenue. Just turnover. And I couldn't have been prouder, or I couldn't have been more amazed that people would actually hand over their money to me. Now, what they got back probably wasn't a high-end kind of quality product, but as we went on, they got much better, as you'd expect. The more you do something, the better you get. But that business kind of took off, because it was just me. Yeah. And the next day I went out, I did 23 euros. The next day I did 28 euros. And then within a few months, I was able to pay myself a wage. And I was able to start contributing to the household again, because it was just my wife's job paying for everything essentially. And she had to pay for the mortgage. She had to pay, everything that goes with running a household. Yeah. And I could start contributing to the house again, which was a very good feeling. Yeah. And I remember how stringent and how mean I was at that stage, because every slice of ham meant something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was almost just penny pinching in a way.
Everything
I used to get these
little labels and to put on my sandwiches, and I'd only go into the stationery shop like every day. I used to go in and buy just like enough for my next day sandwiches. The minimum amount, because I couldn't afford to buy any more. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy when, like, now we're so flippant about buying stuff, like buying stationery. It's like, I had to spend a couple of €100 there on shite in Viking. Whatever you need for your office, where I was always like counting the labels and they were like 3 cents each or something. But that's kind of really like goes back to business 101. It's really about understanding your financials, about understanding your bottom line. And now if I fast forward to oil and how we're looking at our figures, it's kind of, they've come full circle, as in I'm just as stringent when I'm doing that spreadsheet now for oil. Yeah. And when I'm buying like 20 grams worth of mushrooms, or when I'm buying 15 grams worth of coffee at a time, like I'm still very stringent on how
the numbers might be bigger, but the theory still applies.
It's exactly the same. And like, it was so tight back then, like, and I've said this before, but like I could tell you how many packets or how many slices of ham I had in my packet. I could tell you the amount. I was like a human kind of stock counter. Okay. And I could just tell by opening the fridge what was in it. But you become so intuitive when you're so ingrained in what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? And that it's a beautiful part of business for me anyway. When I go back, that's a beautiful part of business, because your finger's on the pulse, and that finger can easily come off the pulse. Very, very, and it came off the pulse for me multiple times, and that's why I have kind of 2 failed businesses.
And does that come from going kind of a bit more hands off, whereas you're completely hands on in that business, and then as you get into other businesses that you'll probably get to, is that you probably were a little bit more hands off. You had other people kind of running the business for you that you don't see. Yeah,
I think with the Good Mood Food, the sandwich business, was the main thing that happened to me was that I went from myself, who controlled absolutely everything. Yeah, I micromanaged everything because no one else was there to do it. I would do the marketing, the website, the inventory control, the supplier purchasing, supplier price management, whatever you want to, like every single thing you can think of in a business, I did it. Yeah. And that's down to the relationships with your customers. And I often remembered, like, I know, again, side stories, but I remember I eventually upgraded my 5 Series BMW to like a fridge van, but I often remembered going into the petrol stations and only filling up €5 or €10 or enough to get me through the next day, because I was just so tight of money at times. But what happened after 8 months was I essentially got so busy in that little kitchen that I was pushed out because I was subletting it, and I was standing on the toes of the owners, and they told me to essentially find my own premises, which I did. And what happened when I found my own premises, another kind of weird story was I went out and met these people on a Wednesday through my brother, who was in commercial property. And the following Monday, I was running a 60-seater cafe, which in normal circumstances doesn't happen. Yeah. But in this scenario, it did. And it all kind of felt normal to me, because that's at that time, in 2009, 2010, where everything was just all a bit crazy, and there was companies failing left, right and center. And there was like 50% vacancies of properties on high streets, that these guys were giving me their coffee shop, essentially. I didn't have to put in any investment in. I just was rocked in and started running the company under my company.
Right.
And so I just was taking all the revenue. I inherited their staff. And I suppose going back to your original question, what happened was that I started hiring people, and I started having to understand a lot of new things I didn't understand.
A whole new process you hadn't touched on before.
A whole new thing about
hiring and management and
managing
else.
people. How do you talk to people? Like staff, as in, your subordinates, if you want to call it like that, because you're the leader of the company and you have people working under you and they need to take your direction. And how do you give that direction? And what's your tone of voice? I didn't think or care about that. I just get it done. Yeah. That was my kind of attitude at the time.
That was the mind frame you're in from basically
I was running on a high engine. Like I was running around the place from 4:30 in the morning onwards. I was just like on this high octane kind of adrenaline buzz all day. And I started, having to understand about accounting, which I had no clue about, payroll, paying your taxes. I had no clue about this. Sounds so stupid now that I'm talking about it. And how to, and the other mistake is that people started to come to me with opportunities. And I just said yes to everything. Yeah. So I said yes to opening up my business and extending it out to swords. I said yes to loads of new accounts, which is fine because obviously accounts were revenue. But I think I went from within the space of a year or a year and a half to employing just me to employing 20, 25 people. Okay. And I was way out of my depth. Yeah. And we had 2 vans on the road. We were serving hundreds of people every day. And in my head, I was managing it, but I'd stopped stock control because I didn't have time for it, and I didn't know how to delegate the jobs. Yeah. I didn't have an accountant, didn't have a bookkeeper. I started paying people cash, and this is all the stuff that came back to bite me because I was generating a lot of money, but I was equally losing all that money out the door. And then I was audited. Amazingly, I was audited by revenue in my first or second year of business. And the long story of that is that it was an extended period of auditing because revenue had started the auditing process, and then people within revenue started getting promoted, and my audit would be passed on to the next person, who was then promoted and was passed on to the next person. And long story short was that I didn't pay people correctly for their wages, and they fined me. I owed €12,000 or something in back taxes, which was still a lot of money. Like I would have paid it, but they ramped it up to almost 40,000 in penalties and late charges and stuff like that.
Wow. Okay.
And that was, and I'm sure you've been hitting the gut a few times with jiu-jitsu, but this was like gut wrenching. I was flattened and I didn't know what to do. And for a long time I went into a bit of a depression about that. But yeah, that was the thing. Everything got out of control for me. And the revenue thing was a big lesson because it forced me then to respect revenue. And every time you get that the revenue letter through the door, you get a little bit
Once
of
you
anxiety.
see the little badge in the corner of the envelope,
So
you
it's
won't
the
know what
most
this
important
is.
letter that comes through your door now. And oftentimes, and they're becoming more and more strict and rigid, that they're giving you less time to pay stuff. And if you miss a letter or if you miss a payment, you're getting fined.
Yeah.
Luckily, these days, that's not an issue, but...
an expensive lesson to learn, but probably in the long run, probably saved you. It probably saved you a bigger bill.
I often don't know how I actually came through that period and survived it, but I did, luckily. But like the sandwich business turned into Dublin Barista School, turned into another business called El Porco Loco, which is a Mexican food business. And again, without going into massive detail, we can go into detail if you want, but by 2015, El Porco Loco and Good Move Food were liquidated because they failed, and there was over 30 people let go of their jobs. And Dublin Barista School, which I started at that period then, was still alive. Just barely though, I'll be honest. So I started Dublin Barista School in 2011 as a side hustle, essentially. And that became a limited company in 2013. So it became a real business. Yeah. It did very little revenue in its first year, like 165,000 or so, I'd say, in its first year. But it grew steadily every year from there. And I suppose the reason why that business succeeded was because the education business is highly profitable. Yeah. When someone's giving you 150 euros, 130 euros is as profit, give or take. And that kept us afloat because we were getting a good few trainings in the early days, and we were the only ones doing it. And
where did the idea for Dublin Barista School come from? Like, so you essentially fell into the cafe business in a way. Yeah. And that's what sparked my interest in coffee. Okay. I was in the coffee shop. Obviously there was a coffee machine and I didn't know how to use it my first day. I was like, okay, the people who are working here, you have to use it because I have no idea. And then we got our coffee roasters in to train me on how to use the machine. And I thought I was brilliant, but I was actually terrible. Like I was handing out terrible coffees to people. And I'd say we lost a lot of business because of me and my inability to make coffee at that stage. But then I kind of got interested in where the school came around was one of my good friends owned an English school at the time. And he started talking to me about education and coffee education. And he said, well, would you start a barista course? And I was like, yeah, I have no idea what that is. Okay, let's try it. Yeah. So I went over to London and I did a really good course in London with a guy called Andrew Tolley, who's kind of quite famous now in the coffee sector. Globally, he started some big coffee chains and had has been quite successful, but he was a very good trainer and I learned off him and I came back kind of like energized to teach people how to make coffee. And we put on a very basic course, like showing people how to use the equipment. And the main purpose of the course was to help people get a job, because at that time, this was 2011, there was a high unemployment rate because of the crash. And people are coming in looking to work for free, which we did try at the beginning. But like when you have people coming in who don't know what they're doing, they just take more of your energy and more of your effort to kind of look after them. And so we decided to try and monetize it by offering courses. And it worked from day one. We got the same guy to build the same €200 website that I did for Good Move Food, and people would email us with bookings, and they'd come in, they'd have to walk into us and give us a €50 deposit. Okay. And then they have to pay us the balance on the day. That's how we did it. We didn't have any online payment systems, or they could lodge the money into the bank account. So we started there and we did one course a month. That turned into 2 courses a month, and then we were running them like weekly. And then it was like, okay, this business is making more money than my other business. So this is actually in its own right a proper business. So we started looking for its own premises, and we found the ideal premise on South Ann Street, which is just off, it's the intersection between Grafton Street and Dawson Street. Yeah. I don't know if you've actually been there, but I've been past it. I haven't been in. And at that time, that street was derelict nearly. It was 50% occupancy. There was it was crazy. So we actually had a pick of buildings. This was the benefit of starting a business back then. So we this building here is perfect.
It's affordable. It's a bit like random when you walk into it. It's real narrow, and but we have like 4 stories in it. We're able to build a coffee shop into it. We have 2 training rooms now. We have 15 people, 16 people now in the company, and that company now. I've gone a bit sidetracked on what I was saying, but so it became its own entity in 2013, essentially. Where it is today, it's very, very busy. We've developed it into a really strong, good business, the Barista School, which I'm still involved in. I'm still operating. So when we started off, the business model was coffee shop and training, and that was it. Yeah. And at the beginning, nothing happened. Yeah. Like we had no customers for coffee, and we had very few customers for the training, but they did kind of filter in eventually. As in the first year, we were very close to folding. It was very low revenue. We didn't, and the reality was that I'm not a very good marketer, and I didn't know how to properly market the business, and we didn't know how to properly get the name out there. I was kind of fumbling around a lot with stuff. Okay. My strength, and when I look back in businesses, I'm a good operator. I'm good in getting up and doing stuff. Yeah. But I'm not very good at promoting or publicizing, or it's a skill set that. It's one of the reasons why I'm here today is to partner with people who are good at it.
It's a bit of an Irish trait that as well is you don't want to put yourself out there too much. I think it's a subconscious thing with a lot of Irish people that when they start something or they try something, a lot of it is almost self-deprecation of, oh, sure, we'll see what happens here. We'll see how it goes. I think
naturally, like, we slag you for like doing anything that's kind of like out of your comfort zone, especially guys. Like, we'll be slagging you for putting yourself out there. It is an Irish mentality, but even like, I wouldn't have been good at basic marketing. Like, okay, I could build a website and stuff like that, but I had no idea about ads or promoting or like, it was a different world to me, especially coming from as an employee. I didn't really understand the space. I understand the basics about business, but
at that time as well, it was probably a very dynamic landscape. It has changed so much, and the genesis of what we have now in terms of, let's say, digital advertising, back then that was, I suppose, rudimentary and was just really starting to
it was all word of mouth. And still, like, we've built that business with that kind of sales mentality of knocking on doors and building a positive culture in your business and teaching your team or showing your team how to do things properly. That kind of gives the customer a very good experience. So whether that's coming in for a cup of coffee, how do you greet them? How do you actually process the coffee? How do you make it taste as best as it can taste? How do you produce a really high quality cup of coffee? How do you bring a student into a training course and make them leave excited? Do you know what I mean? That's a skill to be able to do that. You have to hire the right people to do that. So I was sort of good at understanding that kind of those processes, those kind of more kind of intrinsic processes. I know they're important, but shouting about it on Facebook or Instagram, I find more difficult.
You're almost shouting into the void when you're in social media. Sometimes it can be difficult to feel like you're getting traction or feel like you're getting anywhere. Yeah. You almost feel like you're just screaming at a wall. It's very different to, say, I suppose, having a cafe or a physical business where you can actually talk face to face to people and get their
But those people
feedback.
Then talk to other people, and that's
word of mouth. That
was the effect that we had on the company itself. Was like, we spend very little money on advertising in the Barista School, but we're growing every year. And it's because of that. I'm a firm believer it's because of the team and the work ethic and the positive experience we give people. And the culture they're talking about it. Like, where we work with about 200 schools now, and that started 7 years ago with 0 schools. And at the beginning it was knocking on doors, but now everyone's coming to us. And that's the way you want to build a business. And that's the way, even with oil, I'm like, how can I reverse engineer the company for people to be coming to us and for people to be shouting about us and being our ambassadors on the ground. That's kind of a harder thing to do, I think. But
well, I'll be honest, James, I'm going to be a big ambassador of oil from my experience of using it. I know so far it's a really nice product. I think my main reservation with, there's a lot of like protein coffees and things like that coming on the market, and I noticed that when I tried oil, the first observation I had of it was just the general taste of it. There's so much, especially in coffee now. Coffee is such a big market, a big industry worldwide, that flavor profiles can kind of get left behind a little bit. And especially now with adding, let's say, the mushroom aspect to it, and building that kind of health aspect, that it's not just about coffee, because I think everyone's a lot more aware now of caffeine and the negative effects of caffeine too. But yeah, the initial observation I had with oil was the taste of it. Firstly, it tastes beautiful as a coffee in general, regardless of what kind of extras are added into it. And then the advantage of, I assume, I don't know, maybe you can fill me in a bit more about the adding in the mushrooms and the specifics. You can go into a bit more about what mushrooms are in it as well. But I felt like there was less of that caffeine slump afterwards, like in that kind of couple of hours later period. I know that I was really bad. I'm supposed sometimes certain days I'll get into like 4, 5, 6 cups a day of just general, like, let's say, regular coffee. Getting towards then mid-afternoon time, I do find that slump comes. That 3 o'clock slump is a real thing. But I've noticed that with oil, I don't seem to have that slump. I don't know if that's to do with a combination of the mushroom additive to it.
Yeah, I think there's, in terms of the slump and the jitters, what the science has said, and I think there's a big conversation to be had around the science, but by all accounts, and what I understand from researching, is that the mushrooms slow down the absorption of caffeine into your bloodstream, which slows down that kind of, some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others, slows down that jittery kind of experience, particularly if you're having a lot of coffee. So sometimes, if we're having 5 or 6 coffees a day and we don't even realize we're drinking it, if you're at the office or whatever, you can suddenly find yourself kind of like shaking a little bit. Like I've a very low sensitivity to caffeine, so I don't really get that as much. But from what I understand, and part of, like, to be honest with you, the jitter thing was never even on my way of thinking. Like when I was developing the product, the caffeine jitters were never on my radar. I'll be 100% honest. But from researching other companies and from researching people's feedback about jitters, and from looking deeper into the science, that apparently the mushrooms that are mixed in with the coffee slow the absorption of caffeine, which help. It
kind of levels off that graph of peak and trough that you get with, say, regular coffee.
Yeah, I guess so. But also then, like, I mean, I think a lot of the afternoon slumps are not just from coffee, they're from what you eat at lunchtime.
Sugars and that as well.
Particularly if you're eating like a high carb lunch, you're definitely like if you have a bowl of porridge at lunchtime, you're gonna feel tired a few hours later. If you have a big dirty sandwich, like there's all those other factors that go into it. It's not just the caffeine element. I mean, the creation of the product was initially for me, before I ever considered making it a business. It was just for me. It was just for my own interest. I had become, through the entrepreneurship process, I'd become burnt out after 2015 when I liquidated those 2 companies, and I went into that kind of dark space. Over the next kind of couple of years, I started drinking a lot. I started eating badly. I put on a huge amount of weight. When I started my first business, I was still playing sports. I was still playing rugby. I was really, really fit. I would have been around 95 kilos. Fast forward to 2017, I was about 125 kilos. So I was classified obese. I looked it as well. I have some nice pictures of a nice overhang. I can show you. But I was drinking every single day. Alcohol, that was. And that kind of leads into this kind of bad diet, and it leads into this kind of mood swing. I had my first son, Charlie, was born in 2014. My daughter, Sally, was born 18 months later. And I was like, just right at that period where they're born, I was in very bad mental, like, they're obviously amazing. And when you have kids, it's a life changer. It's an unbelievable change your life for the good. But I was still in this very negative habit space of drowning my sorrows, drowning my anxiety and stress in alcohol. Just really, it's, as I said, going back to my granddad and my dad, it's obviously in our family, it's in our blood, like it is in a lot of families. So I was going down this path of negativity, drinking a lot. Like I was secret drinking at home and stuff, like trying to pretend that I wasn't drinking as much as I was. I might bring out a can and show my wife that I was just drinking a can and watching TV, but I had probably had 5 before that she didn't know about. And I just don't know how I functioned. Number one, I don't know how I operated. I was definitely, my moods were bouncing off the walls. I was up and down every day. It would be, and then in 2017, we were on holidays in Spain, and I took a selfie of myself. And normally I cry when I tell the story, but I'm not going to today. And I took a selfie, and I looked back at the picture, and I didn't recognize me in the picture because I just was this obese mess. Yeah. And in my head, I was a disgrace, and I was letting down my kids, I was letting down my family, and I just kind of broke down. I just had a moment, and I said, I'm changing from that moment, and that's where my kind of health kind of kick kind of started. Funnily enough, my mother, who was herself a heavy drinker, but she was really into her health. Aside from the over drinking, but she was really into her health, and she would eat very clean diet, and she would have this kind of, I remember she used to have this yeast kind of an egg drink she would have in the morning, and she used to call it the yucky drink because it literally looked like a cup of mud. It was disgusting.
One of those old school Irish passed down through generation things.
I don't know where it came from. And I was so close to calling oil yucky, but I didn't get the approval from my co-founders. I think it's such a cool name.
I think from a marketing point of view, I think you went a better route with oil.
Yeah, oil is much better. But I got a little bit too sentimental. And so I went on this 2017, I just did a 180 and I didn't stop drinking straight away, but I started running, I started going to the gym, and amazing things started to happen. I started to lose weight. I started to feel good. I started to get energy. And I went down this rabbit hole of, now it's called biohacking. That everyone is the
you
word.
You were biohacking before biohacking was a thing.
I was biohacking.
Gary Brecka talks a lot about biohacking, doesn't he?
Gary Brecka, but it was Dave Asprey, who was the inverted commas godfather. And going back to Dave Asprey, who started Bulletproof Coffee. I don't know if you know Bulletproof. Yeah. So he was the founder of Bulletproof Coffee. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's MCT oil basically and butter, and you add that into your coffee and you blend it up, and it's actually delicious. Yeah. Beautiful. And in 2013 or 2014, when I first opened the coffee shop in Dublin Barista School, we were the first company in Ireland to have bulletproof coffee on our menu. Okay. And because we were the first, and I was crap at marketing, we didn't really sell many. So, but people would come in and they were interested. And I got a bulletproof or a blender, whatever, the bullet blender, and I would just be blending up like butter and MCT oil and coffee, and it was just delicious. And it was really like good for like your brain, and good for like, it was zing you up. Obviously the caffeine, which I now know is classified a nootropic because it energizes, basically gets your brain going.
Caffeine's classified as a nootropic?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't
Caffeine
realize
is classified as a nootropic. Okay. So it's a superfood, essentially. Yeah. And when you look at the ingredients of oil, they're just like natural ingredients that grow in the wild. Obviously, they're processed and stuff, but coffee by itself is a nootropic. So coffee by itself is a great pre-workout. Because it's just every morning I'm in the gym, I'm having my oil, and or if it's not oil, it's just a cup of coffee. So caffeine is a nootropic, and yeah, so I was into biohacking before I knew I was into it, and I went down this rabbit hole from 2018, March 2018. I gave up alcohol because I went on a 2-day stag to Madrid, and I came home and I thought I was going to die, basically. Yeah. And I had a 5-day hangover, and I got back on a Sunday, and on the Monday I had to drive up to Monaghan to do a coffee training, and it was all an absolute disaster. And I had like this fear for a week. Yeah. And I couldn't deal with that anxiety anymore. I was shaking. And I just stopped from that moment, and the will was just strong that I kept on going, and I created my North Star kind of life goal was to be there for my kids, and was to be an inspiration and be a leader for my kids. And that kept on driving me not to drink. And the longer you don't drink, the more your resilience grows.
The less you feel the need to drink.
That as well. So all of these things, like, and obviously the history of my dad and stuff, and there's a huge kind of psychological story about trauma and everything going back to childhood that we probably won't go into today. But like, as part of my own recovery, I still go to a psychotherapist nearly every week, every second week now, just to talk and to understand and figure out things, and to make sense of why I am sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And to incrementally improve every week. And as part of that psychotherapy, I journal every single day now. And I have done since my 43rd birthday, which was in April this year. I never journaled before. I'd sporadically write stuff. But again, it built a disciplined habit of writing. And it's powerful. As stupid sometimes as these things sound when you hear people in the podcast talking about journaling and, you know, electrolytes and all the other kind of shit you hear people talking about.
At the time,
but this thing is so good for your head. It's unbelievable. For me anyway, let's just say. And I just work out a lot of the crap that's on my mind that day. And it's amazing to see as a person how you yo-yo so much in a week. Because when it comes to journaling, for example, on a Sunday, I'll review it the previous week. And I was like, can you remember what you did last Wednesday?
Oh, absolutely.
That was a question.
No.
Can you remember? I couldn't either until I started journaling, and I still don't know what I did last Wednesday, but I still go back to my book and look, and it's like, that's how I felt last Wednesday. That's the kind of the stuff that I was doing. And I was like, I was amazed that I'd forgotten. And if you're not kind of tracking your mood and how you felt or what was going through your mind at that time, I mean, it's kind of like you're just kind of floating around the place in a whirl. So the journaling has actually focused me. Now, it doesn't mean I'm always in a good mood or I'm always, you know, doing great things all the time, but it just kind of reminds me that, oh yeah, I was feeling like that. I was feeling terrible on Tuesday for some reason because I had a trigger about some guy who was doing better than me in business. And then the next day that motivated me and I was in an amazing mood because they did all these great action things and it moved me forward. And the next day I felt terrible because of this or because, you know.
There's always something.
If any of us look back at our week or a month or years, like we just yo-yo up and down all the time. And trying to get that kind of balance is hard work.
But really regardless of what you do, you're still going to have that yo-yo sensation or those feelings of going through those peaks and troughs. And
it's just the awareness. For me, it's just being aware of it and to know that I'm being triggered right now. Like that for me is amazing. And to be aware of the trigger. It doesn't stop me being triggered. It doesn't stop me having that reaction.
But you can take a step back and realize that it's happening.
I'll take a step back and I'm journaling later. But in the moment, you try to get better at how you react in that moment to that particular trigger point. And like, okay, breathe. Okay, just run away for 10 minutes or whatever it is that allows you to deal with it. And sometimes you just react and you blow up and you whatever any individual does in trigger moments.
Everyone has different reactions to different triggers. But I suppose doing the journaling, you're able to look back and see, well, there's a pattern here of when I get triggered, then
crazy.
Something happens over the next couple of days.
It's actually mind blowing when you read about your own life and you've forgotten it. It's kind of like, how did that happen? How do you forget every single day you've lived until you actually start documenting it? That's probably a great thing you do when you're documenting on camera. Like that's probably even better than journaling, because if you're video journaling, you can probably
I've tried journaling and I kind of dip in and out of it. And to be honest, when I was doing it most actively was the periods when I was a bit low or a bit down or in a kind of a slump of some sort of a mood, let's say. And when I look back at it, even a couple of weeks ago, I was looking back at one from earlier this year and I noticed the date. So I put the date on the top corner of the page, and the dates, there's always a few days between. There's always like, okay, I feel good this morning, I'm not going to bother journaling. Whereas then when I had been talking about starting doing the kind of video side of it for a while, I kept putting it off. But then when I realized that I was missing out on the positive days as well through actually writing journaling, let's say, I thought it's going to be a lot easier for me to pick up the camera and hit record, because the way my handwriting is quite neat and slow, and I'm very specific about how it has to look.
I can tell
as well.
by the way you have the building fitted out. Everything is nice and everything has its place.
Everything has to be, I'm not going to say I have ADHD, but I must be close to it. But it's, or OCD, sorry, not ADHD. That's offensive to OCD people. No offense. But yeah, so my handwriting is a lot slower than the speed at what my brain works. So by the time I finish what I'm writing, I've forgotten about the thought that came into my head of what I was going to write next. So that's why I think video works for me better. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of clips that I record that don't make the YouTube videos. Yeah. There's a lot that I don't want to. I try to put as much as I can across, because that's the point. The point is essentially documenting the journey, being able to look back in it, not just for myself, but maybe for kids and grandkids in years to come. Like, you're talking about the story of your father and your grandfather, and I'm sure you'd love to have seen what they went through day to day. So having that record as well as yeah, maybe you don't want to see it. As having that record of being able to actually see me speak my thoughts, reading someone's thoughts written down are one thing, but being able to see how the facial emotions, how they're coming across while they're saying these things, that's why I kind of find it is really beneficial. And then it gets to the stage where, I record clips that don't make it on, but they're essentially me almost crying down the camera. But that's the therapy, that's the journaling for me. That's it's audio journaling.
I'm not saying everybody needs to journal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just think you need something to express your emotions. And like, you can talk to a psychotherapist, which is great. But just like that moment where I only spend 10 minutes doing it. Like, it's not as if I spend all day doing it, but it's therapeutic. Sometimes when I'm driving, I just hit a voice record, particularly when sometimes when you're driving or you're in the shower, like random places where you don't have access to your phone easily, you just take some notes. But it's just a habit. The point that I was getting to ultimately was like just started to create positive habits. And isn't it interesting that like we're here talking about trying to be positive people, you know, and you're trying to document the positivity of your life, the journey, the ups and the downs. That's all positive. Like, the downs are just as positive as the ups. We're trying to create, like, you know, your business, Coffee and Camorris, it's a positive business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, only good things will come from it, I think, anyway, from what I can see.
Like, I think the other aspect of it when you talk about having an outlet is the exercise side of it. For me, jiu-jitsu is meditation. The way I explain it to people is it's very hard to explain the endorphins that are flowing through you after a jiu-jitsu session, a really tough session where you've had really tough but enjoyable kind of training session. And the way I explain it to people is that if you're going to do meditation, whatever form that's into you, essentially the explanation of meditation or the definition is being present and in the moment. And when you're doing jiu-jitsu and someone's trying to choke you or rip a limb off, you cannot be any more present than in the moment. So it's that combined with, say, the journaling aspect. It's having all these little outlets, and obviously the kind of the physical capacity end of jiu-jitsu, physical exertion end of it is another thing that it's all these outlets to release this potential negativity.
I've only done jiu-jitsu once, but I really liked it.
It is very enjoyable. I need to get into it.
Yeah. It's a sport that I really like, that kind of combat stuff. But I've never done it.
I know a lot of people that I speak to about it, and I try to get friends of mine and people that maybe say that they haven't found that physical outlet for themselves yet. And I think I used to say that jiu-jitsu was for everyone. I got so ingrained in it and obsessed with it so quickly that I thought this is something everyone should do. I think it's the perfect outlet. Where I've transitioned away from that a little bit, in that I don't think it, like, everyone's different. And obviously for me it's jiu-jitsu. For you, like, you've done a lot of trail running and ultra marathons, and we'll get into that. But what I've got away from is that I think everyone should try jiu-jitsu, because it's not just that aspect of it, but it's also the I think for general society of people realizing how someone much smaller, much younger, much more feeble even sometimes can really do harm to you or put you in a very precarious situation. So I've kind of, transitioned away from that, but I still think that as a physical outlet, it's not exactly the physical outlet for everyone to use as, let's say, their...
I think it's important. I mean, I have my 8-year-old girl and my son Charlie's 9 now, but we started like wrestling as part of our bedtime routine. My wife's not too happy about it, but just before we go into bed, we wrestle. And like we just get like, you know, obviously I'm 100 kilos and they're only like a feather, but like I let them choke me out and stuff. I'm not by any way good at jiu-jitsu, but for them just to get a bit like of experience of like combat, and you know, I think that's important.
Kids wrestle for fun anyway, really.
I know, but like I want to get them into that kind of arena of not being scared, and you know, if they're being bullied, that they know they can stand up for themselves. And this is the conversation I'm trying to have with my 9-year-old and my 8-year-old as well, is that like when you're bullied, because I was bullied for a period in school, when you're bullied, you feel scared and you're fearful and you're avoiding the guy or girl who's bullying you. And it's a horrible place. But if you can show a bit of bravery and courage and just stand up for people, then once you stand up to someone once, you'll always stand up to people. And that's the message I'm trying to ingrain, because I went and I didn't experience enough of that as a kid, and I want them to experience it. And I'm promoting like contact sports. I know it's probably not great for your brain, but my son plays a lot of Gaelic football, a lot of rugby, and he loves them. He loves the contact sport, particularly rugby, where it's full on like tackling and clearing out rucks and scrums. And they're only 9 years old, like, and they're actually hammering people. And my daughter Sally now as well, she's getting into a lot of contact sports and stuff. I think it's a key thing for positive independence as we're growing up, especially as a parent. I know you're not there yet, but you'll come across all these things as down
the line sometime, maybe.
Yeah,
no rush. So your outlet essentially has been, like, for a while there, I'm not sure where you are now, but in terms of trail running and ultra marathons, was a phase you kind of went through?
Yeah, I can go back to like, so in 2017 when I went in that kind of 180 degree, I just started running like 5Ks, and I was really, really unfit. Like it was embarrassingly unfit. And then I started going to the gym, because my wife is very fit, and she has been consistently fit. I started going to the gym, and it was difficult to go to the gym because I felt embarrassed. Number one, because I was obese. Number two, because I couldn't lift anything. I didn't know how to do a deadlift. Like, and I was like, what do you do with that bar? I had no idea. Okay, I've been in a gym before, and I knew how to do a bench press and stuff, but there's obviously a full skill set that you have to go through. So we did some joint personal training in the gym, and immediately the weight started falling off me. As soon as you start lifting weights, like it was crazy. And I have a picture on my Instagram where I'm holding a 25 kilo plate, and it's to showcase how much weight I'd lost in that period of time. Maybe it was like a year and a half or something, or a year, I can't remember. But it was just like from running and lifting weights. And I started to tone down my diet, and like I went through a period of just being probably too kind of strict and too committed to the cause that I eventually broke. Like you can't keep the monk lifestyle up forever. It's very difficult.
I think it's like everything else. You have to go to the extreme on one side or the other to find where the balance is in the middle. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm coming back into, even only now, coming back into more of a balance, because COVID kind of was a big jolt in the middle of it all. So in 2019, I decided I wanted to get a marathon done. So I got a program written for me, and I followed it perfectly, and I did the Dublin Marathon in 2019, and I did 3 hours 45 minutes, exactly the time I wanted to get. Brilliant. So it was a great achievement for me, and I felt like I was back kind of where I was 10 years before in terms of my physical condition. And during that time, then I was just like all about like adding stuff to my coffee every day. It was collagen, it was like just you name it, I've tried it. Like I've thrown everything into my coffee, and I was getting into 3-day fasts. I was trying vegan. I was trying vegetarian. I was just experimenting with everything. And did the carnivore diet for a while. And I was in like really good physical condition. I was down to like 12% body fat, I think maybe around that kind of zone, down from like 35% body fat. So I was in good nick, and then COVID happened and fucking everything exploded in my head. So I was just like, lost my train of thought, like lost my everything.
Yeah.
And I started putting back on weight again, didn't even realize it. But the gyms closed. Because I lived up in Stepaside at that time, I was living on a mountain. I just started running up and down the mountain, and it was good. And then my neighbor, turns out, who I used to work with in my mortgage broken days, Rob Priestman, he's a mad endurance runner. Like he just has done some crazy runs. So I just started lightly running with him, and they turned into like 30-kilometer runs.
Wow.
And then I did, I got invited on these series of kind of private kind of races. And there's the Barclays Marathon in the US. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's like the toughest endurance race, toughest long distance endurance race in the world. And they created an Irish version of that called the Irish mini version of the Barclays, which was like an 80-kilometer run.
Wow.
So I did I've done 5 ultra marathons, but my first one was like 70, I think. And then I did an 80 and then 60. And I've never gone over 100, let's just say, but
not yet.
The process of running in nature on mountains is something of, it's as close to a spirituality or some sort of an outer body experience that I've come across. Yeah. When your endorphins are going through you and you're in nature, and you just feel like your brain goes into overdrive, into a positive overdrive of thinking and creativity and thought. Yeah. And you start solving all of your problems in your head on a long run, particularly. So I just started to get obsessed by it, and I was running every single day. I was up at 6 a.m, running to the top of mountains, and I absolutely loved it. And I'd probably still be doing it, only I moved house and I moved away from the mountain, and I just just stopped getting into the routine. And obviously COVID was a little bit messy. Yeah. And as we talk about, trying to find that balance of really double downing on work. I got really obsessed with wanting to be super successful in my business. So I really kind of doubled down trying to focus on how I could be super successful, to the point where I went and started 4 companies. So now at the moment, I'm involved in four companies. Mm-hmm. One of them is oil, obviously, which is I'm CEO and is my main focus. Yeah. We've raised a lot of money. We've raised almost €1 million for that company, which doesn't mean anything, by the way. It doesn't mean that we're
despite what a lot of people seem to say these days.
It's not a point of celebration. It's a point of stress more than anything. Yeah. When people believe in your product and people believe in the industry that we're trying to get into and trying to kind of create a space for ourselves in, that's great and it's nice, but it doesn't mean you're succeeding. Yeah. Whereas Dublin Barista School is the opposite. It's a business that is super successful, and it has no funding, it has no debt. Yeah. It just works because we worked hard on it over the last 13 years. And I'm involved in a couple of other businesses in the coffee space, but they're kind of my main focuses. And it's interesting when you start operating multiple businesses, you start to understand what's really important about operating a business. Yeah. And the foundational piece for me is become the finances, where I wasn't at the beginning. It's like everything, the foundational basis of everything I do now is accounting, essentially, and
making money to make the business justifiable,
making it sustainable, and making sure that we know where we're going and we have enough runway to survive, and we have the right amount of people that we need to hire and to work and all the rest of it. And making sure that there's enough gross margin in our products to make sure that we can spend enough money to acquire a customer, and that we're not going to lose money. I think the basis of it all, and oil as a separate product, as a oil was created for me, but then oil became a business and that became serious and real. And I don't want to fail at that. And where we are right now is like, we're well funded, but like we're not number one in the world.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we want to get to.
Yeah.
And I suppose every business has to have some sort of a mission or a North Star about what we're trying to achieve. And like we can describe oil as a health and wellness brand, if you like, or as a mushroom coffee brand. But ultimately, it's in the name of the brand. It's optimizing your life. Because I'm trying to optimize my own life.
Yeah. And
it's hard. It's really, really hard to not eat that chocolate bar, and it's hard not to flip out at those things, and it's hard not to go down the slippery road that's right in front of us, because everything, like indulgence is everywhere, like all of the vices in life are everywhere, and to say no to those things is really, really difficult. Not to saying that you shouldn't have a few.
So that kind of comes back to your North Star, like having that having the North Star, a defined kind of metric to live your life by, almost, that you're not going to get sidetracked to all these different vices, if that's the word you want to use.
I think individuals need to have their own North Star, and then the brand has its North Star about what it's trying to achieve in an authentic way. My version of oil is, I want oil to be a positive aspect of somebody's day-to-day life.
Yeah.
As in, it's going to be part of a positive habit creation where they know that they're going to be drinking a really nice coffee, and they're going to be, their body is going to be absorbing the benefits of the medicinal mushrooms, and it's going to be helping them in a positive way get better. But that doesn't mean that just by taking mushroom coffee, you're going to like turn into the Incredible Hulk. And it's part of
one small part of a bigger picture.
It's part of a habit stack. It's part of a, it's part of you wanting to be that little bit better. That goes along with all the other things that what works for me doesn't work for you, and vice versa. There's things that work for me that doesn't work for, like, I like working out at 6 a.m. in the morning. Some people don't, and they work out in the evening. There's no difference. It doesn't it doesn't make me better that I'm in the gym at 6 a.m. if you're in the gym at 6 p.m. It makes no odds.
A mutual friend of ours, Gary Fox, is big on Atomic Habits by James Clear as a kind of a guide to building that. I'm sure you are as well. And it's something that I've read the book as well, and it's something that I try to consider. That I used to think that routines were a bad thing. I used to think that maybe that was back to being, let's say, in a 9-to-5 role, that I didn't like the structure of it. I think I didn't like that daily structure of, okay, 9 o'clock you're in, 1 o'clock you go on your lunch, 5 o'clock you go home. And so I kind of rebelled against the routine bit. But I think having daily habits, especially positive ones, like daily exercise, let's say, that it's very important for obviously physical health, but your mental health as well, and being able to perform optimally every day.
Definitely. I mean, like, I would say that there's some daily things that you do every day that just are non-negotiables. But in terms of like a rigid daily structure, like I don't like the rigidity of a daily structure. Like yesterday, I spent all day in my office. I did I think 7-8 hours of solid, just like office work. I couldn't do that every day. I knew I could do that yesterday because I was at a meeting this morning, and then I knew I was coming here, and it's like, that's my day. It's going to be completely different. Tomorrow I'll do another half day in the office and something, and then I know generally what I'm doing most days. On Friday I'm doing a planning session for 2024. That's what's happening. And so every single day is different, but I'm still driving towards being a little bit better every day, being a little bit more organized, and also like taking care of business, making sure that the business is driving forward, making sure that there's so many things that we have to be prioritizing, and just figure out what those priorities are is the hard thing, I think. But
you mentioned about the North Star, that you like, as well as having a personal North Star, the brand needs a North Star as well. Something that I think I've come to realize over the last 6 to 12 months is that essentially people buy from people. And it's partly why I started the YouTube venture, let's say, is that I wanted to put myself out a little bit more from showing what I do to try and build a brand, as well as with ZOMA as well. But it's about showing that those two North Stars, the personal North Star and the brand North Star, are aligned. And I think I try to align it as best I can. And there's certain people I would look up to at an international scale, at a world level, that are kind of perfect descriptions of that, let's say, or I'm not sure what the right word is, but someone like Ben Francis from Gymshark is, I think, like the almost perfect representation of that. And I think you are as well. I'll put you in that category, that you're perfectly living the life, or your North Stars for your personal North Star and your brand North Star are really, really aligned. Like you spoke so much there about optimizing what you try to do with your daily habit stacking and optimizing your life on a day-to-day basis. And oil is one small part of that. And yeah, you're hoping that it'll be part of that for other people. But
every night when I'm journaling because I didn't do it right. Which isn't a great way of looking at things sometimes.
If you're perfect, you've nowhere to go. So it's always having something, trying to get 1% better every day.
It's important to me, I think, to talk about this, the brand and the product. It's important to me because when I was sitting on my couch in April 2020 and everything was gone in my head, I didn't know if the barista school would ever open. I didn't know if I'd have a revenue. I didn't know if I could support my family. I didn't know. All these like anxiety-driven questions were circulating. And I asked myself, I remember I was sitting there drinking a cup of coffee, so what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? If I have to start from scratch, which I'm happy to do, I'll do. What am I going to do? And that's where the mushroom coffee business kind of started from. I started buying the mushrooms in the local health shop, putting it into my coffee. It didn't work. It was sediment. I ended up eating with a spoon. I bought, on the record, I bought 4 Sigmatic. You can bleep that out if for legal reasons, if I'm not allowed to say what I'm about to say. But I bought 4 Sigmatic online, was there a European distribution. And I was like, okay, let's see how they do it. And the coffee came and I tasted it and it was pure rank. It was rotten. I was like, interestingly, the mushrooms dissolve in the coffee. Okay, I have to figure that part out. But this coffee thing is just disgusting because, inverted commas, because I've been working in the coffee sector for so long, I'm considered an expert. And I'm a sensory expert with the taste and drink a lot of coffee. And I knew this coffee was defected, which is a negative side of coffee. When you do enough tastings, you're tasting for negative or for defected coffees. And this coffee smelt and tasted of fish, which is one of the, you'll be surprised, there's lots of this type of coffee in the market. And I knew immediately, I said, they just chose the cheapest and the worst coffee possible. It's the rank, it's the bottom of the ladder in terms of quality. Understanding from an economics point of view, understanding that it's a US brand, that they're just like mass marketing it. And I said, okay, I can definitely do better than this. Yeah, I know how to do better than this. I know how to roast coffee. I know how to source good coffee. I know how to brew good coffee. I know now how to source the mushrooms. And I know when I start mixing them together, I can make this taste a hell of a lot better. And that was where the whole process started from. Because I wanted to do something that I was interested in myself and passionate about myself, and health is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I don't always do what I say I'm going to do, but it's something that, I try to instill with my kids. Like we're not by a long shot, we're not perfect in terms of our health standards, and we have to get a lot better. And this country isn't great for it in general. Yeah. But I wanted to create something that was a springboard for me to create maybe other businesses down the line or other products that will help us get better. And maybe there's a children's line, and maybe there's a, whatever, that can help us lead healthier lives and help us get better and help us have a clear way of thinking and remove the brain fog and start, being excited by life. Do you know what I mean? As I was like, I think it was a mixture of eating healthier and, giving up alcohol, and the energy levels that I had and the amount of positive thinking that was not just positive, just general thinking time that I had was powerful. I was like, why didn't I have this before? Where is this coming from? I started asking the questions. It's just your body is reacting to eating good food. Yeah. and getting enough sleep and doing whatever all the other good stuff that we're doing. And, you know, it was like, it's immensely powerful. And I think that's really what I'm trying to get through to this brand, is that there's power in positivity, there's power in positive habits, there's power of, you know, saying no to the chocolate bar, which I struggle with personally.
Yeah.
You know,
Don't we all?
Yeah, there's power in all these things, and to build a community around that. Like you know, I go to the sauna. We have a sauna community down in Greystones every Saturday morning, and it started with just me and Gary Fox, as you alluded to earlier, and it's grown to about 12 people, I'd say, maybe more, kind of maybe 15, but like there's a strong core, like 10 people every Saturday morning that are there, and we've become friends. And you leave feeling energized and powerful, you know, because
it's another release, really, isn't it, for all of you?
Yeah, like it's not just the release of the sauna and the cold water, it's also the power of a community and the power of talking to people who are on the same wavelength, we're all doing the same things. Like we're all fasting, we're all eating, trying to do our best to eat healthily. We're all like, you know, trying to optimize as much as we can do. We're all, you know, we're doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm also learning from them. And there's just an element of power in that. And that's when you tap into it, it's just amazing. And I think as a society, potentially we've lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
Just because we've become isolated by our phones, and we're all together, but we're all alone at the same time. And that's what, you know, the brand is about. And I'm also, like, if I can speak as a CEO, extremely disillusioned is the word I would say, by marketing and by this, particularly in the space I'm in, this health washing, and this absolute load of bullshit people are throwing out to people, and manipulating people is a good way I'd say it. And maybe I'm just a little bit simple and naive. It's quite possible that is the case, but like I see so many health products on the market that aren't actually that great for you. That there's a load of mushroom products in the same industry that I'm in that are giving you the crap part of the mushroom so they can make more margin and more profit and make you feel like you're healthy when you're actually not doing anything. There's guys selling this amazing health elixir when they've piled it full of sugar. I can't get over the inauthenticity, the lies, everything about that kind of health wash marketing style that people have. And I don't know how to overcome it, but a few of the things that I'm going about doing it in oil is going down a scientific route, because number one, I'm a CEO, I'm a business guy, I'm into my health, I'm not a scientist. Not qualified to generally talk about these things apart from recite studies that have been done and all this type of stuff. And so what we're doing is, number one, we're lab tested. Everything is going through a science lab. We're partnering with a company called NatPro, which are a food science research group coming out of Trinity College, who are going to double check and double test all of our ingredients to make sure they are what they say they are coming out of the other lab. Because we want to give people good stuff. Do you know what I mean? And as far as my research has told me, number one, it's lab tested. Number two, we found the best quality mushrooms in the market. That not the only, but it's the best standard of mushrooms you can buy. So we're sourcing through the biggest mushroom farm network, where the mushrooms are being grown, they're being picked by hand, and they're being processed at the other end to come out in a powder form. That's how we take it. But it's just important to me anyway, as a health kind of guy in general life, that what I'm putting into my body is good. Yeah. And I stopped taking a lot of supplementation because I didn't know whether the product was good or not, and how did I know if it was good? Now, in a lot of cases, I don't think we need that much supplementation. And the only way that I can check is by getting blood work done and getting regular blood work done and taking supplements that are suitable to my blood results, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes back to you live in the brand, and I suppose you talk about the kind of disingenuity. Is that a word?
Yeah, disingenuous.
Yeah, we'll go with that. In the market in general, like in any kind of niche, let's say, just in marketing as a concept, there's do what you can to sell what you have and say what you have to, and I suppose going the more authentic route of like we were saying, living the brand and going with the science and trusting that over time it's authenticity is going to win.
Yeah, I believe so. I hope so. But like also, if you've got a lot of money to throw at people, in the short term, you're gonna also have some quick wins. There's some brands out there that I would predict won't last in the long term. There's some brands out there that have gotten huge revenues in a very short space of time by Healthwashing, and that's my own personal opinion. And it's just not great, and people buy into it, unfortunately. And that's what I don't enjoy about it. I just it makes me feel a bit anxious whenever I'm putting products out there. Like if we're training a group of transition year students how to make coffee, we want to train them how to make coffee, and we just don't want to go in and say, oh, they're only kids, they're not going to know anything anyway. Let's just pretend we train them and we'll go home and give ourselves an easy day. We go in and we make sure that we've built a culture that our team go in and we train them and give them our 100% because we want them to go out and make sure they have a positive experience, and also scream positively about our brand as well.
Yeah, it comes back full circle to what we spoke about an hour ago. That it's the word of mouth is the kind of best form of marketing. Yeah, and if you're, I'm
hoping that if you're drinking oil, that you will feel the positive effects of it. And like anything, like any supplementation, there is a period of absorption, which probably is anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, where your body has to acclimate, I think is the right word. Okay. And take on board everything that's happening, but there's a lot of good stuff in the medicinal stuff anyway, in the mushrooms that are good for you.
I definitely think it's a trending space, but I don't think it's one of those trends that's going to come and go. I think
I don't think so. I think mushrooms are here to stay in every sense, and we deal with medicinal mushrooms, but also psychedelics. It's not just to be sure that we don't deal in psychedelics, but like they just became legal in Australia as an example. I assume that's going to have a knock-on effect to becoming legalized globally over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. They're only in clinical settings legalized, but I think there's a lot of power in mushrooms. There's a lot of power in the medicinal stuff. There's a lot of power in the psychedelic stuff, and they're going to help people. It's particularly different areas of life, whether it's down to psychology or your just general health.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot to end. Thanks for coming in. Thanks very much. It's good to be here. I can talk more, but like we can be here all day. You're not going to have that slump.
The batteries are the ones who are dying here, so it's all right.
So thanks for coming in, James. That was a really interesting discussion. You have an incredible story, and how you've got from where you were and what you went through to where you are now is very impressive. And it's a pleasure to kind of watch you go through the process of building this brand and the business, and spreading the word of a very impressive product. So
it's a great pleasure. Thanks.
So if you want to go to coffeecommerce.com or drink oil.
We're still going.
Yeah, we'll still
drinkoil.com.
We'll push that before we go.
I'm the modern day entrepreneur on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Find me there, James McCormack.
If you're interested. And if you have any questions for James, reach out to him. And
Coffee and Kimura, so that's where you'll be seeing a lot of us.
So if you want to go to either coffeecommerce.com or drinkoil.com, there'll be a collaboration there, and you can try out oil, and hopefully it makes a nice impact in your life.
Exactly. And we might have a discount code for you. You have to check out Coffee and Kimura for that one, though. We haven't figured it out yet.
It'll be there somewhere. All right. Thanks, James. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chris.